What is your best fire me I freaking dare you moment from work? I was 17 and working part-time at a fast food restaurant. Someone wrecked the men's restroom, shat in the urinal, rubbed shit all over the wall. The manager came out and told me to clean it. I refused. She threatened to fire me, to which I laughed in her face and told her you can clean it yourself or you can lose an employee and still clean it yourself. I don't need this job. Needless to say, I wasn't fired and I didn't clean that up. I still laugh thinking about it. Worked for a newspaper, editing and actually putting the paper together, arranging it all, placing stories and pictures where they need to be, titling, quoting and sourcing everything. I was a one-man team and used an overly complicated system that I figured out how to use really effectively. They treated me like shit, set impossible deadlines and berated me for not meeting them. One day the boss tells me to fully put a paper done by the end of the day, gave me no warning. I had no articles from the journalists and no photos from photographers. It was my job to collect it all from everyone and he wants me to do it in a single day. I told him no. If he wants it done, he has to give me more time. He tells me if I don't have it done by the end of the day I am fired. I tell him that this paper can't function without me. He tells me I need to take the day off and cool my temper and that he will do my job for me. Get a call an hour after I get home that he needs me to come in and do it and I can have as much time as I need. Promptly quit on that asshole. Frick your shitty newspaper. Worked a job where I was the only one who knows how to take apart, clean, fix, and put all the equipment back together and do the weekly and monthly maintenance. Had a boss tell me one day that I was doing a poor job and not doing enough and that anyone could do it. If I did not step up I would be fired or else, as they had manuals for each piece of equipment. So that night I took apart all the equipment weekly and monthly stuff too, cleaned them, and then just left it apart for them to figure out that morning. Then I turned off my phone after getting home for the entire day as I had the day off. When I turned it back on the next day I saw that I had initially received angry texts ordering me to return and put everything back together. This lasted an hour. Then texts saying I risked being fired. Then texts begging me to return. Then more texts trying to compromise with it. Then an apology before nothing else for the rest of the day other than that the head boss wanted to see me as soon as I came in the next day. Came in the next day and over half the stuff was still not put together and what had been put together was put together haphazardly and would need to be taken out again then put back incorrectly. Was immediately asked to be seen by my boss and their boss to explain myself the moment I was seen entering. Once in the office I told them that if they were not there to apologize then just fire me then and there or drop it and let me put all the stuff back together. They looked at each other and then told me that I could get back to work. Boss never called me lazy again. I once called in sick to my part-time job at Club Monaco. My manager told me that if I could not find anyone to cover my shift, I was going to be fired. So I FaceTimed her from the and had the doctor explain to her that I needed an MRI cause they wanted to make sure I did not have a brain tumor. When I was 17 I worked a summer holiday job at Pizza Hut. I had transferred to my hometown restaurant from my university town restaurant. I was there for 5 weeks and hadn't been paid yet. The dickhead boss claimed it was because I gave him the wrong employee number. I hadn't. Anyway, after 5 weeks of no pay I rang him on New Year's Eve, the busiest night of the summer, and said I wasn't coming to work because I wasn't a volunteer and I wasn't going to work for free. He told me if I didn't go to work I may as well not come back as I would be fired. I didn't go to work and had a fun New Year's instead. Then a few days later I called the employment tribunal I am in New Zealand and told them what had happened. They called my dickhead boss. He then called me, offered me my job back and was nice as pie for the rest of the summer. I worked at an unspecified telecom a few years ago. I was a senior manager in charge of programming, third-level support, and production support. A business unit bullied through code changes made by the business side through a side deal with a legacy programmer in the data center, circumventing my team, QA and production testing that just had to get implemented immediately without going through any testing at all. I refused, The CIO overruled me. 72 hours later, phone activations had ground to a halt. Customers nationwide were screaming, and the CIO called phone conference after phone conference demanding timelines for when I was going to get this shit fixed. He kept screaming to have members of my team to get on the phone and explain themselves to him. I refused. Finally I snapped and told him that if he wanted me to fix his mistake I would need to get off the ducking phone, go work with my teams. And the only reason they hadn't walked out yet was that I was keeping him off their asses, but we would all happily go together. 24-ish hours later QA and my team had the bullshit cleaned up and fixed for a clean rollout. This was all to avoid a 24-hour delay for QA production testing. I wish I could say that was the only worst time. Husband was having his gallbladder taken out and was having complications before surgery. I needed to leave early from work for about 2 hours and my boss threw a fit stating I could not leave. I told her I had 300 hours of sick time I can use for myself and my husband, and if she wanted to push I'd take all of it at once, leaving no one but her to do my job. She said she had fire me if I tried. I just looked at her and said I have to go, I'll send you my doctor's note. I was not fired. I was actually awarded that year for job performance. Over the first year one worked there, I essentially took over most of the tasks in my department which were previously held by other departments and was done badly because of it. This led to a massive increase in productivity. I then found out I was paid significantly less than what others were making and others in my position across the industry were making. So I go to my boss and tell them I had done all this work increasing productivity and I would like to discuss a raise. They said number, so I worked there for another year, asking for a raise every now and again until I was offered a job that paid double. It did not start for a couple months, so I held on to that job until I was set to submit my 2 weeks. I asked for a raise again, thinking what the heck, why not? My boss goes off, tells me I won't get a raise and says some very colorful things about it. It culminated with her telling me if you don't like your pay, maybe we should evaluate your future at this company, to which I replied already have. I took another job and this was your last chance to offer me what I deserve. I quit and walked out of that office. Friends told me that my sudden departure caused a massive backup of work that ended with my manager being fired for it. Worked for Radio Shack and always butted heads with the district manager. He wanted me to use these ridiculous sales techniques that might work in a big city but were really pushy. The year he became our DM I won a contest for best salesman in the whole company, out of about 14,000 employees, and I did it without being pushy and forcing stuff on people. He still tried to get me to use these ridiculous techniques each month when he would visit, but after I won the contest I stopped sugarcoating it and would flat out tell him that is stupid. I am not going to do it that way. I was a summer teacher at one of those Korean SAT prep school that hired used college students for a summer, and then promptly worked them to death. Although, I will admit the pay was pretty good. We taught 8:30 a.m. through 5:30 p.m. with an hour lunch, but had homework to grade every evening, prep work, etc. Well, they were mainly focused on teaching English, but I was a math and physics major, so they had me teaching SAT math and college prep physics. No problem. Then they decided since I studied physics, I should also teach their chemistry class. I tried to tell them I did not know much chemistry, but they insisted, so I worked my ass off, refreshing myself on all of the stuff before I taught it, while still teaching another math and physics class. One day in the middle of this I got legitimately sick. I called in the night before, per the rules, and told them I could not come in. I took one day off, sleeping in my apartment, and then dragged myself in the next day. When I show up, they pull me aside and say, so how do you plan on making up the time for the classes you have missed? Excuse me. Well, we did not have anyone to teach your classes, so all the kids are behind now. You have to make up the time. We figured you could just extend your morning class an hour for the first week, aka teach over lunch, and your afternoon class could then start an hour early for the next week. Why did not you have a sub teach my class? Then they screwed up. They said we do not have a sub. Well then, no, I am not going to skip my lunch because of your guys' poor planning. We will fire you, and then you would not get your plane ticket reimbursed. They replied, go ahead, First, I followed the rules and gave you notice I was going to be out. Second, you just told me you do not have a sub for my classes. That means if I leave, you are going to lose all of those students that I am teaching. That will cost you a lot more than the Planet ticket will cost me. I just posted this in another thread the other day. It is not exactly what you are looking for, but since it was already typed up, I once worked as a night clerk at a privately owned non-chain hotel. As the overnight guy, I often had to do things that were not really a desk clerk's job, like bring extra pillows or blankets to guests or clean up small messes or occasionally plunge a toilet or something. There was no one else there at 2 a.m. and so it just came with the job. One night I get a call from a room to the front desk and a guy says the toilet is backed up. It is the middle of the night, so I just change his room and I go to take him the keys to the new room and check on the situation. There is shit and piss all over the floor. It looks like they shoved an entire roll of toilet paper into the toilet. There is just shit and filth everywhere. It is disgusting. I probably should throw these guys out of the hotel, but I am young and I honestly do not know how to handle it, so I hand them their keys and just stare at the mess as I use the room's phone to call my boss. I tell my boss about the situation and I do not know what I expected exactly. For him to call a plumber maybe, I am not sure. Like I said, I was young and did not have a ton of life experience. But he tells me to clean it up, and I sit there quietly just holding the phone for a second and I say something like, "No, this is too much, man. I do not even know where to start with this and it is disgusting." And he says, real aggressively and angrily, like, "This is my fault. It is your job to handle night shift problems. Clean it up." So I stood there looking at the floor and a piece of shit literally floats through my vision in this pool of filth, and I came to the most wonderful realization of my life. A realization that made me so happy in that moment that I actually felt a little giddy and lightheaded. When it came to me, I realized I can just quit and go home. I am not cleaning this up. I quit. I remember he said what, and then yelled some, but honest to God I do not remember what he said. I was almost laughing, not at him or the situation, just in relief at the realization no one could actually make me clean up this pool of human shit. So I said I did close the room off and go watch the desk until my shift ended, but I was not cleaning this up. He, in anger, just told me to get the heck out then. Which was dumb because it left literally no active employees anywhere on the premises for however long it took him to get there after I left, but that is what I did. I just left and went home. They tried to withhold my last paycheck when I went to get it, saying I was responsible for the cleanup cost and then that they did not have to pay me because I left in the middle of a shift. But I knew that was bullshit even then and told them so. I think I literally said, "I do not know who I have to call about this, but I know you cannot do that and I will figure out who to call about it." So they ended up just saying, "We will mail it to you," and they did. I actually kind of liked the job, but duck, there are limits. Was 19 and working a minimum wage job in a shop. Owner sold the business to a new guy who had never worked in the industry and knew nothing about any of it. His first day in charge, he decides I look unprofessional and should be wearing a uniform. Then he decides the uniform should include a fluorescent cap with my name embroidered on it. I told him I wouldn't have taken this job if it had included wearing a fluorescent cap with my name embroidered on it. But he tells me it's going to be mandatory from now on, so I will be sacked if I don't wear it. Fine by me. I will be leaving for any other job which pays exactly the same but doesn't make me wear a ridiculous hat. And I will take with me my good relationships with all our contractors and suppliers, and my knowledge of how the duck all your equipment actually works. Reader, he didn't fire me, nor was I presented with a spiffy new hat when all the other employees got theirs. I did leave about 2 weeks later though, as he was an insufferable twat face with a real anger issue, and was impossible to work with. Was very tempted to pop in and visit wearing a cap with my name on, but I didn't want him to die from rage. I am a speech therapist. I work in a skilled nursing facility. For the most part, they all suck. This is no exception. But the place I used to work, the boss was a scumbag, to the extent that the entire rehab staff signed a letter asking to get him fired. He was basically forced out. I eventually left, and came to my current job. I swung by the rehab gym and saw his ass sitting in my current boss's office. I kind of froze in shock. I thought he was interviewing for a job there, so I went to the boss at the time and told her flat out that if he got hired, I was walking out immediately. She got a stunned look on her face, and quickly assured me that he was not working there. That was my first time drawing a line in the sand like that. This was about 5-6 years ago. I was the second in charge of our shipping department, making $11 an hour. The head of shipping had a mental breakdown, so I took over while he got help. About 3 weeks after he returned, the company released him because they didn't like him and I could do the job. When they told me they had released him, I asked if there were going to be interviews for the job, or was the job just mine since I was number 2. I was told they were looking, but I would have a chance to interview once that process started. Fast forward about 6 months and I am still doing this job that pays around $50K a year for $11 an hour. We had some issues with staff turnover and process changes because the warehouse manager thought he knew best and would listen. They then tell me there wouldn't be a shipping manager, just a shipping lead, which would be an hourly position. I ask about a raise, get told my review is in 2 months, so just wait. I wait 3 months, 4 months, then one day, after a 14-hour night shift, I get a call from the William telling me I have to come in right now. When I get there, he unloads on me for things that were beyond my control, and mistakes other people made. We start yelling, and that's when I told him, I make $11 an hour doing this job. Ex-boss told me he got paid $50K a year to do. I don't need this shit, give me a raise or I won't be back. I then went home and back to sleep. When I go back to work, I am met by William and ops manager. They appreciate the hard work I've been doing, and are putting me on a salary starting at $45K since ex-boss was there longer. I negotiated up to $48K. For the past few years I've worked at one of the nicer restaurants in my small beach town. I am one of the only servers there who cares about doing a good, and I am the only one who doesn't take a smoke break every 15 minutes. This past summer a new, very illegal, rule was implemented that if we messed up an order in any way we would be liable to pay for that messed up food. I usually didn't have a problem with mess-ups, so I didn't bring up the legality of this matter since I make good money and don't want to start fires in places that don't concern me. That until I rang in a cherry-glazed burger instead of a cherry-glazed steak, each stylized CGB and CGS in our shitty computer system. I fixed this with the kitchen, but not before they had already started the burger. I told my manager and she just gave me a disappointed and told me that the rules are the rules. I then dived into both federal and state workers' rights code and told her she would never see me again if I found any money out of my tips at the end of the night. Never had a problem fixing an order again. Was working in a restaurant, already knew I was sick, but our managers were assholes and I knew if I called in they did be extremely pissy. Showed up to work around 8 a.m. By 9 a.m. I knew I was not gonna last the rest of the day. Managers still made me stay. Around 9:30 I was pre-bussing my tables and just the sight of half-eaten food pushed me over the edge. Managed to hold my vomit until I got to the dishwashing area but puked in a trash can immediately after putting my plates down. A CO worker saw me and vouched for me when I went to tell my manager I was leaving for the doctor. He said, even with a doctor's note, if you leave work today you will be fired. I said, you have human waste in a kitchen trash can and have not even done anything about it. It is on camera. I am leaving. Showed up for work a few days later and did not hear anything about it. Ended up quitting a few weeks later for a job at a considerably higher scale restaurant. Put in my 2 weeks notice at wildly understaffed job. 6 days later got sick. I call around and see if anyone can take my shift. No one is available. Tried to call out that morning. Shitty manager tries to persuade me to come in even though I am barfing everywhere. I non-committally agree to call in later in the day to see if I am feeling up to coming in anyway. Call back, say I am still sick and will not be coming in. Manager blows up at me in front of customers, being rude as duck. Eventually asks what I expect to do about the shift needing to be covered. I say I have done everything I am required to and it sounds like a management problem to me. Hang up and turn my phone off. Consider subscribing if you enjoyed this video and if you want to see more of Reddit Universe.